Today we have another session about something like helper, mixin, plugin, custom component. I put all these four into the basics because they're pretty much comparable to each other. And at the end of four live sessions, I would like to compare these. So today we are going for the mixins. And without further ado, let's start. So today we're talking about mixins, and see what I prepared for you. I prepared a view, which you already know. We had this the last week. If I type 5, it will be 5. If I press 8, it will change to 8. If I press something lower, it won't display. So that was what we did last week with the helper functionality. Today, we're talking about the mixins, and I prepared a view with mixins, including a mixin which is located under getAsSetter. You remember getAsSetter app is getAsSetter, mixin, and now the name of the mixin, which is in here, the view mixin. You can name it as whatever you want. I just added it in here because I want to compare it later on to the controller mixin. So what can we do with a mixin? Before I go into details about that, I would like to take a look at publishers, because we will need that within our mixin. So it's very important that you understand how publishers works. So in here, let's just start that. We are restarting this. We're getting an error, mixin. There's something happening. We'll go into that later. Let's take a look into our main app, which is in here, the view model, the data, and I put test in there. As you can see, it's the same as reference. Let's take a look in what it's in there. So right now it says bar 100. So our view model does have data which are test bar 100. Let's go one step below that, and we can see in here there's another sending is set to false, and within test we do have bar 100. What reference is doing, it's allowing us to set a point in the view model with the same name. Besides that, we can call it from the controller with this lookup reference or this lookup and look up the test. But for what we are talking about right now, it's important to have this reference in here because we're using publishers bar. Right now, if I go in here and say, I would like to set bar to 144, and now we look into our data, our test object says 144. So what publishers does is it takes a config. It has to have a getAsSetter from the config setting. So basically what we would expect in here is to have a config which says bar 100. And then we can use the publishers because we know it has a getAsSetter. So whatever has a getAsSetter can be used in publishers to automatically set the value to the view model. That would be very cool in case we, for example, have a text field which should output a data binding, and then we could use the test.bar and we get always the 144 or whatever it's set to. And as soon as we set a new value, this will update the view model and will update our text field. So that's upfront to know, because right now we want to dive into mixins. We have this mixin in here, and this one says, okay, I'm extending xmixin. I have some configuration. I have a publishers, a config, and an update foo. that's it for now, what we care about. So the MixinConfig configs allows us to set configs. Without this, we won't have the ability. Let's just restart this. And you remember that we set this bar in here. Let's just wait for the, okay. Let's take a look at our .test. And right now it says bar is undefined. And that's because we said that bar should be publishing, but it's undefined. Now, if we set the bar, it says there's no function like that. So adding this back in here, we get this config foo and bar configs for setter and getter. In our main view, we didn't set that. We could already have set in here, as I did that before with the config, to allow publishers to have a getter and setter. But what we want to do today in here is we want a type of component, and whoever inserts this mixin to have a certain functionality. We want to have our config for foo and bar for all these items, to have a getter and setter, and to publish the value of foo. I see this quite often, that people say, okay, let me add in here publishers. This won't work. I will show that because let's take a look in here. As you can see, we do have bar. Let me just redo this. Say test, we have bar 100. So there's no foo. And it's not published to our view model. And that's basically because the way how mixins work. So let's get in here and say make test. We add this function, and what we should expect to happen is console log. Oh, let's add, we'll go with a log and say test only, test only. So let's restart this. And now what happens is all the functions in here, methods in here, are mixed into our view. So it's basically the same as if I would say, take this and place it in here. Yeah, that's exactly the same what the mixin is doing, but with limitations, and that's what I'm trying to talk about right now. So let's go back in here, and we have our app, and say make test. Make test. I'm sorry for that. It has to be this log. Yeah, this.log. Now we should, but actually you could see it's throwing an error for this, so it's running this. Basically, it's doing what I'm asking for. Okay, it says, okay, test only with an identifier or information identifier, test only. So that's what my log functionality is doing. And that's functionality which I'm mixing in too. I'm mixing in a log function, which allows me to console log with some colors and stuff like that. So if I would like to add something like this to all my components, but not overwrite my component or anything else, because this is some special functionality, and I have quite a few things to put into that functionality, I might not want to pollute my base component, but instead add this as a mixin. The same is with data binding. Sencha adds these things via mixin into all items that have to have a data binding. So what we have in here now is that we figured out we do have make test in here. Now, let me copy this and add this to the main view. Now we do have make test in the mixin, and we do have make test, but now I need to have xlog. Have to have, oh no, we could have this, oh, right. So this log. So make test would, if this works from here, let me add in here some brackets and says view test only. And in my Mixin, I add Mixin test only. So let's see what's working, which function method is now used. And that's one of the good things about Mixins. It says test from the view. It's not this one, but it's this one. So Mixin will look into the main view, and whichever functionality already exists won't be overridden. But those things that are not in the main view will be used. As you can see in here, this log is not part of the main view, but it's part of the view Mixin. So what happens is this is put into my main view via the Mixin, and the test functionality, make test, already exists in here and won't be taken from here. So that's the first important lesson to learn. The next one is, if I go with a MixinConfig, we already learned if I place config true, I can add new configs which are merged into the main view, or if there are already configs existing. And now we get an on. This is a listener, and this says onDestroy. So onDestroy will be called, there's an after, before, and so on, but we are going with the standard onDestroy right now. And this one allows us, as soon as the main view gets destroyed, this will be called. So we're pressing here the destroy button, and we're getting into the destroy functionality in here. So basically, this could be this log, and we place in here success, s. Okay, let's try this again. Now we get a nice output in here. And we're pressing the destroy button again, and it was success. So the onDestroy functionality has been called. Now what happens if I'm not using the extend Mixin? This is really important to understand, that if you're not using the extend Mixin, that the make test will be, I removed that, will be mixed in, because we are defining it as Mixins in here, but it is not defined as a Mixin sub component. So this is really important to understand that. Now we do not have this. And now let's try to figure out what happens if I'm destroying now my main component. I'm pressing the button again. It's gone, and it's not showing me the success. So whatever is in here won't be used if you're not using the extent of Mixin. So always be aware, if you're not using this, you're not getting the additional functionality. Let me show you exactly what I mean with that. So we're going again with the main, so this is the view, view, and the view dot Mixin. Oh, it's empty. Oh, we destroyed it. Let me just rerun that. Sorry for that. So we are creating our main view, and then we are saying view dot Mixins, and from here we are taking our getter, setter, Mixin, view Mixin, and now we can see in here that it says, okay, I have a get bar, a get foo, as you would expect, because we are having this config in here, which creates a getter and setter for foo and bar. The same with here. It already placed in here the update foo, which we wrote in there. So everything is in here, right? Now we're going the other way. Now we are using the extended Mixin. And we're rerunning it. And we are taking a look at the same Mixin again. And now it says, let me just say in here, make this smaller. No, this one. So, okay. So now we do have after class Mixin and on class Mixin. So we're getting these two additional functionalities for the Mixin, and we're getting a Mixin ID, stuff like that. So all these things are possible as soon as we are extending from Mixin, and then we can use this functionality. Just be aware that you can't use this. Oh, sorry for that. We can't use this without Mixin. Now, for the next one, we said publishers doesn't work in here because, oh, let's take a look for that, won't we? Let me just look in, oh, we're going the other way around. First, we are using the initComponent listener in here. And it's just a listener for initComponent. So we do not have to say this call parent to make the whole thing working. It's a listener for initComponent. And we are going for this one in here. And we're setting a debugger there because I want to show something to you. So let's go for this one. So as we learned before, things are not getting overwritten if they already exist. And if I say this dot publishes, it says it's already an empty, though in the prototype it says bar. So it's already defined. Now let's go in here and say we do not want this publishes in here, and let's take a look what's happening there. So we do not have any publishers in here, right? We just took it out of here. And now it says null. So it's not undefined, it's null. But there is something already there. And that's why publishers can't be set in the view Mixin because it already exists. It's not undefined, but there is something in the main view that is set to publishers null. That's why this doesn't work. Okay, so let's get rid of this. So now we are going for set publishers. So we are trying to set the publishers in here to our Mixin publishers. Let's try that. Mixin publishers I created down here. Let me just get this further up so that it's easier to see for us in here. Okay, so make test, we won't need that any longer. Gone. Okay, we are setting the publishers to our Mixin publishers, which is this object in here. So foo should be published. F8. Now that we have that, we can go in our here test data, and we get foo 100. So this one is working, though I've written in here it doesn't work, but it's working. But the problem is, as soon as we get in here our bar publishers and we run it, continue, and let's take a look. It still just says foo, so we do not get bar anymore. Okay, this is a huge problem because sometimes publishers is already set from Sencha, and you do not want to get rid of that, but what you want is, if you're writing a Mixin, you want to make sure that you can use it wherever you want to use it. Whatever component you want to add a Mixin to, it should be working. And that's what you have to make sure. That's why I wrote in here, it's not working. It's not what we like to have this for. So that's why I came up with this idea. I say publishers is pre-filled with the publishers in here. And then we add our own publishers, Mixin publishers, from down here. So this one will include the foo, and it will include our bar. And then it says, set the publishers to the new publishers and give me some success. Let's run this. Great job. So let's take a look how it looks right now. We do have foo and bar. And if I go, for example, for in here, set foo 20. And if I go for bar 144 again, and we take a look in our test, we have 20 and 144. So that's the way publishers will work. Only inside our initComponent listener, we can set this to preset our view with additional publishers. And that's basically because it won't override anything already existing in the main view. So this is how Mixins work, and this is why you need to, for the on listener, to extend the Mixin. And that's the way I usually preset this with the Mixin and then the original value, so that it's easier for me to read. And we have all the important stuff in here. So this was the part for the view Mixins. Now we are going to the controller. In the controller, it's working exactly the same, but there's an additional functionality for Mixins in here. Right now, what we have in here is highest number field was what we entered in here, and set background for the green stuff, all this stuff. And then we pretend to have all these on enter name field, on enter last name field, on enter hobbies. And each of these, let's say, is 40 lines, and you have a lot more functionality only for this form. That's the point. And you might have a lot of different things in a single view. So a lot of things in a single view controller. And that might make the whole view controller rather unreadable. Now, we want to have functionality that still goes in there. So that's exactly where our view controller Mixin comes into place. We could add, for example, a controller Mixin field to text. And whatever I have in here, I could just rip out of here and place it into here. And right away out of the box, out of the box, we have all the functionality of here right in here. And right away, our main view controller will be easier to read, to figure out what happens in there. So we're just ripping out some functionality out of there, and the controller contains only stuff that goes with the fields in the view, and not with the images or something else in there, or buttons. It's only for the fields. And what happens is, if I place, for example, on enter field name, copy this, go into the main view, let's go for the B bar and add a handler V, we'll take away this. And now if I go in here, it will figure out, oh, I can jump right into here. So as you can see, I'm just pressing Control, press, and I'm just in there. Isn't that awesome? So you get the full control, and that's why I typically add in here a new directory, which is called, for example, controller Mixin. And then I add my controller Mixin right in here. And all of a sudden everything gets pretty neat and you can figure out exactly what's happening there. So let's go for the main controller. In here, we have to update this because right now the location changed. So we have to change this to view main controller mixin, and our name of the I would rename it now. So let's go for fields, for example. And yeah, to refactor. So now we have to rename this in here for fields. And in here, oh, we forgot to change it in here. So that's view main controller mixin dot fields. So now we right away, if we read the code, what am I doing wrong here? Main controller, I can right away see, okay, I have a lot of functionality in this fields mixin. So don't look any further for any field stuff in here, just look in there. And from the main view, I just have to control click and I'm right at the point where I have to edit something. And for these, I don't think we need the additional functionality. So I would drop that for controller mixins. For view mixins, I would always add this. It might come in later, or you want to use the functionality right away. This publisher stuff in here, I've seen a couple of fiddles who tried to figure out how to do that when I were working on this workshop today. When I prepared that, I saw a lot of things like people trying to get publishers to work. And either they were missing the reference, or they did not understand that publishers won't overwrite the original publishers, which is set to null, but it's there. So these are the important things you have to remember. And you can use a couple of other listeners in here. Just look in the documentation. I think the most important one described in the documentation is destroy. And this one is what I would like to add, which I think they should have described because it's so important to do things before you start things. Yeah, probably a good thing to know initComponent in the listener, and you can preset your your view. So again, please leave a subscription and a thumbs up if you like what you see, if you can use what I described today. And if you're interested to get more information on the other fields which we were talking about earlier, that we have a helper, Mixins plugin, and a component, a custom component. The next one will be the plugins. And I will explain exactly how to use plugins. And after we're doing the custom component, I will explain where are the differences between all these four almost the same functionalities and when to use what. Have a great day. Bye.